Welcome to our video for completing our requirement of the Georgetown College endorsement of ESL program for 585. This video is to help schools, specifically one middle school and one elementary school, in closing their achievement gaps, creating culturally responsive schools, and critiquing their schools of their current structures in place of their ESL programs. My name is Jackie Flores.
I'm Kelly Paget.
I'm Shannon Richardson.
And we'll go through our suggestions and critiques of each structure.
I researched a elementary school that is local to us, and that school is made up of 580 students with 5 ESL staff members, and I have some questions for you about the school.
Okay, great.
So, can you tell me about the ESL programs?
Sure. There are 5 ESL teachers. Most of the ESL work happens in the mainstream classroom, though. We do pull out, but only for just real newcomers. They also structure it now so that the ESL pull-out time is only happening during intervention block, so that ELLs are no longer missing Tier 1 instruction. But most of it does happen in the classroom in the form of collaboration. That has changed over the past few years. Collaboration at the school now looks more like team teaching or co-teaching instead of tiptoe around the room quietly. So that's something that the school is really working on with the program as well.
Can you explain the use of WIDA at your school?
I think that's definitely a growth area for our school. The mainstream teachers do not use WIDA materials as far as I know, or access results. I do know that every student that has returned a home language survey does do the WOPT and has access scores if they need to be tested, but I don't think that information is really used beyond the ESL room and the ESL teachers.
Okay. What about culturally responsive schooling or community connections?
That's something that the school is also working on. There are several churches that support the school, but also the school has tried to, in the past few years, come up with evening activities where families can come in and really start to be a community within the school. They've also set up the morning breakfast room. It's really a family time, so parents will stay and eat breakfast and begin the day with their child. Again, trying to make some homeschool connections. As far as school-wide cultural responsiveness, that's something that certainly can be improved as well. There are not very many people in the school that are bilingual, especially when a huge portion of the school speaks Spanish. And we have only, I think, 2 employees that speak Spanish. So that's something that we can certainly improve on.
Okay. I know that for the K-Prep scores for the school, between last year and this year, there was a 14-point gain. Why do you think that might be?
I think there are probably a lot of factors there, but the biggest one was probably the shift in the way ELL people worked as far as maintaining that in the classroom and supporting the classroom instruction. I also think that the teams of teachers at each grade really started to look more unified at their units and their plans, so that they were all developing lessons that went towards one common goal. And they're making sure now that when they write units, they write specific lessons that have targeted content goals, and they're not wasting time on things that are not part of the content. So just being really, really focused and intentional with every single instructional act.
Okay. So I have some recommendations for hopefully some continued growth in the K-Prep scores for the school. The first one being with the population of ELLs being 33% of the school's population, I would suggest training for mainstream teachers as well as administration on the ESL methods and maybe how to use some of the ESL methods in their classroom, such as within the sheltered instruction, the guarded vocabulary, the hands-on activities as well as the visuals, for the students to make that visual connection with the word. Might even make the suggestion to math teachers as a math vocabulary that has the addition sign plus the word addition, and maybe even the word addition in Spanish or other home language. Within that PD, I would also suggest training the teachers on the WIDA standards and the can-do descriptors to give them a better understanding of the whole process and why ESL staff uses these standards to set forth guidelines, and it will also give them a better understanding of the access scores and how to use them in their classrooms. Another recommendation that I would make would be using language objectives in daily lesson plans, not necessarily for the ESL staff, but more so for the mainstream classroom teachers that focus on academic content and specific vocabulary words for that content lesson, and not just they're in my head. I'll give them to them, because let's be real, and chances are they're not getting that specific content or specific vocab words. Another recommendation that I would make after doing some research, the school has several computer programs that they have purchased to use with ESL students that are not being used to their fullest potential. And the way to fix that would be to purchase headphones and or microphones if needed, so that the students could use the programs while in the classroom without disruption to the others. I know that the programs are used for explicit learning. For example, Imagine Learning gives explicit instruction in the home language as well as skills to work on in their home language, so that they have a better understanding of where to go from there. The last recommendation I would make would be to continue to encourage the community connections throughout the school day. One way might be to have parent volunteers to come in. They could read to students or come in as guest speakers and share about their home language, their culture, even possibly translate for other teachers or parents who have difficulty with that. And maybe get some who are very fluent in English as well as their native language to tutor as a way to boost
That'd be great.
ESL learning, and hopefully close that gap in reading and math that we see.
That'd be great. Those are great suggestions. I think those would all really help. Thank you. And the next school we looked at was a middle school where Jackie teaches. Jackie, can you tell us a little about the ESL program and other programs at your school that help ELLs?
So we have at our school 45% are ELLs, and 95% of the 45 are Spanish speakers, and 5% are other. So a lot of the emphasis is on Spanish, and all 3 of our ESL teachers have Spanish as their first or second language and are fluent in that, as well as we have 2 people in the office who can also speak Spanish, so that really helps our community connections with ESL, and even as they enter into the school first off. As far as the ESL structure, we have sheltered English instruction as well as pull-out instruction, and it varies per grade level. And so for our 6th grade, it's pretty much 60-40% as far as sheltered English instruction and pull-out, and there's a lot of collab going on with that, as well as our 8th grade teacher. He does a math enrichment for ELL students to really make sure that they're not getting left behind as they go into the high school, and that has shown pretty far gaps, closing the gaps in that area for the math. And in addition to that, the newcomers for our school go to a first period where they're introduced kind of more into the culture of America, and with literacy being kind of the focus for that, and also just social interactions with peers. And they are very much involved in informing our staff what can be done as far as being very, very helpful for advocacy for their ELLs, and how there's a big difference in a student being able to just verbalize language of English and the content and the difference of that. But in addition to the supports that we have at our school, there's a lot of after-school programs such as Literacy Guild and ESS and Starting Gate that really focus on the novice ELLs and trying to bring that achievement gap up. So, and we have, in addition, our 7th grade ESL teacher. He's the soccer coach, and so that really has one of, I think, the biggest connections with the community to really be able to reach out in a very unique way. And I've been to a lot of the soccer games, so it's been very fun to see the parents in that way. So that's kind of our, in a nutshell, what our middle school is like.
Sounds like you have a lot going on
We do.
for ELL students. Can you tell me a little about how your school and the teachers use WIDA?
So this past professional development at our school this summer, before the school even started, emphasized on just the explanation of what WIDA was. It went through everything, and a lot of the teachers, they knew about it, but they really didn't know, and I think they're still a bit confused on what WIDA is. And we're about to kind of roll out into our next semester, being able to have language targets for each child, for each grade level, for each content, for each class, as far as all of the different domains.
Great. I know you spoke a little bit about cultural responsiveness at your school because of all the activities and the ELL teachers are involved in the sports. Are there other things that you see the community and the school doing to
Most
support
definitely. With every program that we have, whether that be our 6th grade orientation or whether that be our kind of pre-6th grade orientation for the families to come in, there's always translation available for every rotation. And so I think that translation piece to really make sure that even though a lot of students aren't identified as being ELL, they come from a family that their home language is Spanish. And so that really being able to help a lot of what's available and offered at our school. And there's also many different ways in which we help other cultures be a part of our school, not just Spanish-speaking countries. I think we offer Spanish as a second language, so I think that makes a good connection between the other students and some of the ELLs, helping them with the American students learning their Spanish, but also we have Chinese, and we have Cultural Diversity Day. We have many different speakers come in who do performances. Our past week, actually, we just had a cultural performance where the Chinese students did their own little dance, and there was some African students who did their own little dance. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, we're, I think, pretty culturally responsive, and a lot of our materials around the school are also in Spanish and in English side by side.
Great. So I'm imagining that's probably one of the reasons why you guys have had such great gains on your K-Prep in the past few years. Do you have others ideas on why else?
Yeah, I think our administration does a fabulous job in really informing its mainstream teachers of how to really focus on that guarded vocabulary. In addition, focusing on the academic vocabulary as a staff. For our staff meetings, we get a list of the academic vocabulary that should be focused on during that week, and then we display it throughout the school as we continue to build upon it and revisit it. We also focus on Kagan structures and being able to really allow the students to verbalize and for them to listen to each other, because we all know as we're talking about what we're learning, we learn it the best, and if we can really articulate it, then it's really being internalized and processed. In addition to that, I think being focused on our vocabulary and our lesson plans in general, not just the academic vocabulary, but also being very aware of the most important vocabulary words a lesson, and making sure that those are visually displayed in English and in Spanish. For a lot of our teachers, that's a pretty heavy emphasis. So
Okay, well, a lot of the recommendations that I have thought of sounds like your school's already doing those and should really just continue to do things like, for example, I had mentioned raising the interaction of each student. So those Kagan activities are something that you would definitely want to continue, and hopefully all classrooms can maybe increase so that students get to really be involved one-on-one with the content and nobody can hide from their turn to talk and listen and speak. The other suggestion I had was to continue the school-wide awareness that you all have begun on the WIDA process and the WIDA materials. And I know you had said you guys were just beginning language objectives as well. So to continue the use of those in all the classrooms so that students are aware and teachers are aware of what is the function of language within this lesson and how can I accommodate kids who maybe need to use a different form to communicate. And I also had thought about more about academic vocabulary, like you had said. I love the idea that you guys are unified in what needs to be taught throughout the grade level and that you're posting those on the wall. Are those also made available to parents at home, the academic vocabulary for units? Is that something that families know about?
actually, that's a fabulous suggestion.
That might be something too that, I know you said you had a newsletter, you did that by grade level, could share that vocabulary and families could learn right along with you and study at home. And the last recommendation that I had has to do with this community and homeschool connection, which it sounds like you guys already have a fabulous homeschool connection with all the sports and after-school activities. So the only other thought I had was the possibility of teachers reaching out to the specific community where a lot of your CLD students live. I know that that's a community that can be a tough place sometimes, and it has been known for crime and drugs and problems like that. There is a pretty good branch library in that community. I don't know if your school in the past, have they had events there or?
We've actually used the library to do report cards meetings, so to pass out the report cards and set up meetings so it's closer to the families.
Okay, well that was my suggestion. That's a good place for teams of teachers to meet and have conferences, and that way it's a little easier for parents to get there. And maybe thinking about, I know you have an ESL teacher that runs one of your sports teams. If there were more CLD parents who wanted to get involved and maybe start some more clubs or more sports activities that kids could really feel more like a part of the school. And I know budget-wise it's hard to do, but if there were ever any bits of money where you could offer transportation after school for kids who want to participate, do you guys already do that?
We have an activity bus after school.
So you're good that handles too. Well, that's great then. Kids who don't live near the school, which a lot of the CLD kids do live in that neighborhood that's a little far from the school, then they can still participate and get home safely. That sounds great. You guys are already doing all the right things. So
it takes a
keep it
village
up.
to raise a child.
And I know that you had said your school is beginning to increase awareness of WIDA. Can you talk to us a little bit about how teachers can actually use the WIDA system?
And I think that's one of the biggest recommendations for my school is to continue, the WIDA, but the whole purpose of WIDA, really making every educational and professional decision based upon knowing our students. I think that's the greatest area of focus that the middle school that I work at, that my suggestion would be is to really know the students specifically and specifically their domains of language. And as I said earlier, for students who are able to socialize in a certain context, and then a lot of us teachers have thought, oh, they're fluid or they're very proficient, when the case is that academic vocabulary is really where they struggle. And just because we speak a language, it doesn't necessarily that means we read it. And I think that's where a lot of the staff kind of get a little blindsided in thinking that just because a child comes from another country that they also automatically can read that. And And so just kind of to reiterate the whole process of the WIDA when as children come into the school, they're given the home language survey. And so the home language survey really helps to identify what students have not been assessed with the WAPT test, in other states, but also seeing what was their previous academic experience as well. And so if as students come in, especially as the newcomers being who have not been tested, then that test is given, and that's only given once. It's tested in the 4 domains of language, being listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And through that, there's given 6 levels of which that they could fall in the categories. And I have here just the WIDA book that a lot of the teachers, I think this is the biggest recommendation, is really to buy. Our school is really trying to move towards having language objectives incorporated in every single lesson plan, and specifically lesson units with the guarded vocabulary. So to be able to really know how to use this as a resource for planning and instruction, the biggest thing is really realizing that we can't assess students over our content if language is such a barrier, and making sure that the language is not a barrier. And that's the whole purpose of WIDA, and that is the whole purpose of the access test that is given once a year for every student, is to assess them, where are they at, and every year they're needing to make a 1-point gain in the 4 levels of the domains, the 4 domains for each of the levels. And so the way that it's clustered, and I know that they're changing the cluster of the way the access test is given, that it's going to be very more individualized. But as far as it being specifics for using this for your instruction, is teachers, as administrators are really striving to close that achievement gap, being able to look specifically at knowing your students in their PIs, their performance indicators. So for example, as students are given their student profile, that they're given exactly where they fall for each of the domains, in addition to the content level. And the content level really testing the language of language arts, or the language of science, or the language of math. And so personally for me, I've really been trying to focus on really looking at those access results, and really being able to notice where my students are in each of the 4 domains, as well as how well do they know the language of mathematics. And so in suggestion to planning assessment, being able to have the end in mind and moving forward, specifically with the middle school, being able to go towards that grade 6 through 8. And so just to give a quick example, the whole bridging of the developing of level 3, so this is the social and interactional language. This could be something that can be incorporated as that language target, and really specifically, so if a student can identify examples of school etiquette based on gestures, illustrations, oral descriptions, and they're at a level 2, and we're wanting to get them at a level 3 of interacting with social or cultural school situations, to depict character development based on oral descriptions, really focusing on that visual piece, and kind of slowly moving away the visual piece for them to really be able to pick up learning just that the literacy piece. And so there's just a plethora of ways in which that we have gone through in our past papers to really articulate how to bridge those gaps, and how to scaffold certain lesson plans to really allow the students to flourish and not have language really be the barrier, but also know the social interaction is important for them to process the vocabulary. And just with the can-do descriptors, those are one of the most important things for educators at our school to really focus on, and that's what a lot of our professional development is going to focus on the next year, in 2016, and what a lot of our committees are forming right now. So
It's good. And Jackie, I know you probably see the same, but at the school that I'm at, I feel like a lot of us classroom teachers, we get a kid and they're ELL learner and we know they can't do the fourth grade work as we're presenting it, so we get frustrated and think, oh, they can't do anything, which is not at all what the case is. But this document really helps us be able to pick out what the kid can do and make it so the child can participate in that grade level's content.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of classroom teachers feel like when they get an ELL student, they just need to pull out some kindergarten work or something, and that's not at
we don't
all.
want to water down that
Right.
content at all.
So this document will help us make sure kids can participate at their grade level.
And even with, their home language supports, and depending on what level that they're in, to support that with their home language, whether that be orally, for them to be able to speak it better, and pairing them with other students in groupings is also something that we need to do.
Chucky, how do you see that working at your school? You're in a different situation?
I'm in a completely different situation. Our school has 2 students that would be considered ESL, but we do not have an ESL staff member. We do not have a staff member that speaks Spanish. But being in this program and learning through WIDA and the TESOL standards and the can-do descriptors, I've been able to share with the teacher who has one student and myself, because I have the other student, some ways that we can build their vocabulary as well as get them learning content level in our content level academic language, sorry. Their background, they had no formal education in Spanish. They were both born here in America, but the home language is Spanish. Mom speaks limited English and dad speaks no English, so being able to go back and talk to them about WIDA and possibly use the app that I know has been created to show the teachers how to let them know what these children should be able to do would be a big undertaking, but something that I think is needed as we continue to grow at our little school. I'm sure we will get to the point that we have more CLD students and families. I do feel like we do a really good job of incorporating the community into the school. The CLD family that we have, mom comes in and volunteers for lunch monitor, and she's always there anytime we need something. So she's pretty involved, and this year, for the first time, we're offering Spanish. So the kids are learning Spanish from a part-time teacher who, and they really like it. They come in and they're talking about these Spanish words, and I have to look at my little one and say, okay, what are they saying? So,
in my personal profession, I've tried to incorporate a lot of Spanish when I've been teaching, and a lot of the American students are learning Spanish as well. So that's been kind of fun, especially with mathematics. I think it's a little bit easier to incorporate it.
One thing that I have done this year at school, knowing that I have one student who is ESL, instead of requiring them to read at home, as I have done in the past, we do books on tape where they follow along, and the comprehension and understanding of the material that we're reading, I have seen increase in the novels just in the first 9 weeks of school. So,
do you know if your schools have the program called Read, Write, Gold?
I saw that in your email, and I'm very interested in Read, Write, Gold, but we don't have that.
Yeah, it's a really incredible program that can take any PDF and translate it into Spanish, and they're working on translating it into other languages as well.
no,
And not just translating it, but having it being read to you in Spanish and looking at it in Spanish and then going back and doing the same in English.
that is not something our school has. So,
Sounds good. Well, you have 2 ELL students, and I know the public schools are closing in on 10% ELL students, and by 2025 we'll be at 25% ELS students, so these are good recommendations for all of us to keep spreading around.
So, thanks for watching our video. And signing off.